Why do I use higher revs coming out of a turn? Why is it safer and faster and help you not high side? How do you get out of a rut when you're doing track days and laps and you're stuck on the same lap time? How do you break through to the next level? Why does the stock spring that's obviously too soft for me feel like it's going to break my spine when I hit bumps? That's a really good question. And finally, to the guy who's been riding for 40 years and never heard of this happening, swears I'm making it up. Really? Making it up? Google what motorcycle racers have lost their fingers and toes to chains and sprockets. I have faith in you. And I have 6 questions from different countries all over the world. I tell you, if you ever wondered, are we really all connected? We are really all connected by motorcycles of all things. I'm Gogo for Superduked.com. Now let's get into some questions about our favorite thing, motorcycles. Let's start with this question about using higher revs to exit a turn. So there was a lot of questions asked about it, so we'll get into it a little deeper right now. When you use a taller gear, right, lower revs, yes, the bike feels smoother. I get it, and you might be feeling more comfortable. So some people were mentioning using higher revs. The bike tends to be a little bit like finicky, you know. It's like on off throttle like this. It's a little juddery. It's true, and there's a solution for that. But the problem is, if you want to avoid that by using lower RPMs, when you want to get out of a turn, right, you got to accelerate. And when you're in lower RPMs, you have lower available power and torque, right? So you tend to get deep in the throttle, deeper than where you are, right? You're accelerating. You know that when I made the video with the data, you could see the throttle, my throttle hand with a bar that's raising, and you could also see miles per hour moving. It'd be really cool to have 2 charts together to illustrate this one thing we're talking about now, because if you spin the throttle like this, whoop, that bar would go up, that chart would go up, right? But your acceleration wouldn't go up that quickly. Your acceleration is going to gradually rise like this. So if you give it a fistful of throttle, whoop, you're here. Your throttle's here. But your motorcycle is trying to catch up to those revs. So this delta, the difference between this much throttle and where your traction is, where your acceleration is, when the delta is big like this, that's dangerous. Because as soon as your tire breaks traction, the tire is turning at this rate. Your fist full of throttle is way up here. So as soon as you break traction, it's going to rise really quickly up to where your hand is, right? So you have to sense when the traction breaks. Like, I feel that I'm losing traction. The tire is starting to spin. Maybe because you're still leaned over too far or you're deep in the throttle like this, you won't necessarily notice it at the first instant, or your suspension starts to move because the swing arm's starting to extend. So you have this amount of time that you have to sense that it's happening. Now that you know it's happening, now you have to react. But because you were so far ahead with the throttle, like, because your hand is up here and your traction is here, you have to now start to ease off the throttle, right? As you're easing off and this chart is coming down, this thing is still rising up, and it's rising with a wicked temper. It's coming like this. So you're like, I think I'm having a problem, and your tire's spinning like this. By the time your momentum of traction spinning up is gaining up here and your throttle is coming down, by the time they meet, you've already lost so much traction. Your suspension is already extending. You're starting to step out. You're halfway through a high side already. And you already reacted like this, but it's so troubling. You've gone too far into I'm going to high side and kill myself zone. Trust me, I'm not speaking because I read it in a book or theorized. I have high-sided myself so many freaking times that you would be shocked if I told you. One day I should do a video talking about every crash I've ever had in 40 years of racing. You will be shocked. So I'm speaking from experience. There's a better way to do it. Instead of grabbing a fistful of throttle and getting so far ahead of where your traction is, when you use a higher revs, you can't grab a fistful full throttle, right? Because it accelerates so much. You have so much available power, right? So you're going to have more of a tendency to accelerate like this gradually. So now your chart, this little graph thing, as it goes up, as you turn the throttle, as it goes up, your speed is kind of also going up with it. If you do it right, somebody mentioned throttle control and things. So if you have good throttle control and you do it right, you always are a little bit ahead of your traction. And I mean a little bit. So a little bit of a roll, this chart is going up. And now your speed starts to follow. This is why I say the fastest way to accelerate is not to make one decision about when it's time. Okay, I think I can finish this turn now. That is the worst way to accelerate. It's the most dangerous and it's the slowest. And it affects your bike's chassis. You lose the ability to turn. Everything's a mess. It's way better to start your acceleration way earlier and get into it like this, 5% ahead of your traction. This bar goes up and this bar is following. And as it starts to catch up, you make another decision. Oh, it's starting to catch up. I need to get a little ahead. And then it starts to, you make 100 decisions as you exit a turn. A little bit ahead, a little bit ahead, a little bit ahead, a little bit ahead. That is the way to keep your rear tire a little bit faster than you're going. You get a little bit stepped out. You leave these nice black, dark lines behind your tires. People come in after riding with you and like, dude, you should see what happens behind your rear tire. You're going. It's good and it's safe. The other thing is a little caveat that I should add right now is another point that also is discussed is this is very simple. Very, very simple. Another thing about high siding that people do that's dangerous and is so avoidable is choose the spot where you turn the bulk of your turn and you finish the bulk of your turn. Start to lift the bike up, then accelerate. Don't start to accelerate because you got to the final apex. You may still be not finished turning. Like when I say finished turning, like the main part of your turn. Of course, when you're accelerating, you're still leaned over as you come out of a turn, but you're not really in the turn as much. You're not changing a direction so much. You're just finishing the turn as you drive out. That's fine. But if you never really pick a spot and you never really get the bike turned and you're just starting to accelerate because the guy in front of you is accelerating or the guy behind you is accelerating or you're at the final apex, you're going to high side yourself because you're still leaned over too far. And you start giving it this much throttle and people around you, guys around you, it's like it sucks you in. They're going away. You can feel them accelerating away. So you start to accelerate more and over the bars you go. So this is why I use higher RPMs to drive out. It is a little bit finicky, but like I said before, there's a solution to that. You know what it is? Thumb brake. Where'd that come from, right? Left field. Bikes do get a little on-offy finicky when the revs are higher. So, and also like some flash tunes, because of this flying by wire thing, can be a little bit finicky too. The Acra tune in my Superduked is a little on-off-ish at some points, sometimes, right? So because of that, in reaction to that, and also something that kind of spurred new learning for me, is I got a thumb brake. Because I don't want to shut the throttle down, pick it up, shut it down, pick it up, make those fine adjustments. Because with my tune, the OEM, not OEM, but the one from factory that goes with the Acra exhaust on my bike, sometimes it shuts down a little too much and comes back. It's a little finicky and it upsets the bike. The bike will fall down a little more or it'll stand up a little more as it has these surges of acceleration. So I don't even do that now. Now I'm leaned over, and as I'm starting to accelerate, if I need to make an adjustment, I just drag the rear brake. And that's a beautiful thing because you just keep the throttle where it was. And you touch the rear brake a little bit, and you fall into the turn more. It's like as you push it, you turn sharper. You let go, the bike picks up again. And you never modulate the throttle. Again, I do that because of this on-off, shut-off electronics thing, which is a little bit batty. Maybe you can get aftermarket tunes that will kind of work that out. I tried to, but it bit me in the ass. It was not a good experience. I'm not doing it again. So that's the acceleration thing, right? Next. Okay, the next question is from a guy who does track days often, and he's stuck at a lap time. Like he's hit a plateau and he can't go any faster. I love this question because we all hit plateaus, right? So how do you break free to the next plateau? I'll share one thing that I learned by accident once, okay? I was racing back east on my FZR 600, and I was starting to win a lot of races. I was a junior at the time, and I entered so many races. I think it was on my fourth win of the weekend, and my brakes went. The front lever, I started to get to a point where I was squeezing that lever as physically hard as I could squeeze anything. And I'm a carpenter, I'm construction. I don't have weak hands. I was afraid I was going to break the lever off. That's how hard I was squeezing. Because turn 3 at Loudon, you go straight towards a wall. And you get the bike stopped and you turn and then you wrap around and you go up this hill. If you blow the brakes, if you blow the turn, you will hit a wall. So it's horrible. So I'm squeezing as hard as I can, and I got to a point where, hey man, there's a wall. I have to turn. And I was not at the speed. I was not going slow enough to turn. But I had to. Because if I just went straight, I was definitely hitting a wall. So I just let go of the brakes and tipped the bike in and went into the turn. And I made it. Lap after lap after lap, I made the turn. And as a result, I went 2 seconds a lap faster than I'd ever gone before. So think about that for a second. This is brilliant, right? Because the lesson is, you could say, don't brake so hard. Don't slow down so much. But think about it. It's one turn on one lap. You don't shave off 2 seconds in one turn and one lap. Where did 2 seconds come from? This is fascinating. And this is the key to breaking to the next plateau, I believe. Here's what's fascinating. I don't believe that you are limited the speed that you enter a turn by traction. I don't believe I am either. I'm not that good of a rider. I may be better than average. I may have a lot of experience, but I'm not like these guys in MotoGP. So a lot of times I'm using what I feel, what I interpret as my speed. That's this. I got the bike to this speed, and now I can start to let off and counter steer and go in trail brake, and I can do my process, right? But it's this picture in my head. So what happened when I lost the brakes? What happened is my pads glazed over. When I got back to the pit, they still had plenty of meat on them, but they had glazed over. They had overheated. So that's why I had no braking. What happened when that great thing happened was my mental picture for the speed that I could enter this turn safely and properly without crashing was reprogrammed. It was reset. I learned, and it was beat into me, that you're going too slow into this turn. So I was forced to go faster. When my mom learned how to swim from her dad, my grandpa John, he took her out in a rowboat and he threw her over the side of the boat. That's how she learned how to swim. It was swim or die. And that's kind of like what happened to me at Loudon. Turn or die. Get used to this new speed or you're going to hit the wall. So here's how I force myself into these situations now. These situations of remapping my mental picture of the speed that I can enter a turn. Here's how I do it. At Thunder Hill, there is one particular turn that has a ton of runoff. And I think when you think about it in MotoGP, I think that they do this too. Did you ever notice how in Friday practice and Saturday practice, a lot of times there's all these trails where the bikes go through the gravel pit. And there's like 7 people went through the gravel trap, and they go to the apron and they make their way back, and it's like no big thing. I think what they're doing is either reprogramming their picture for the speed they can enter a turn, or they're testing the limits of traction, and when they violate it, they just let go of the turn and go straight. Either way, they're finding the edge of something, setting a new threshold, either setting a new threshold, either of traction or of their mental picture. For you and me, it's more of a mental picture thing than it is exactly traction. So I know of a turn at Thunder Hill where if you blow the turn, there's a lot of pavement. There's like a huge apron of runoff. I think because cars lose the turn a lot, so they just made a lot of pavement be out there. So you could just blow the turn. And I tell people who are trying to break through to the next plateau, focus on turn, I think it's 13 at Thunder Hill. Look, next time you go through turn 13 at Thunder Hill, before you turn in, just slow down for a minute and look to the apron. There's a mile of pavement. So the next lap you go in faster. Test yourself. Push yourself to this next plateau. Now, how do you do that? What's the best way to do that? I promise you, there's 2 ways to push yourself in braking for a turn. One of them makes you slower, and the other one makes you faster. These 2 guys. If you focus on, I'm going to brake deeper. I'm just going to go deeper. I'm not going to touch the brakes until I'm 15 feet past where I was last time. Okay, guess what happens? The whole straightaway, as you approach, all you're thinking about is stopping, right? When you finally get into the brakes, if you even make it to that 15-foot mark past the cherry tree or whatever your mark is, if you finally get there, your focus, because you're so paranoid, is 100 and, well, there is no more than 100. So it's 100% of your focus is stopping, which is going slower. And usually you will stop more than you did before. And you're like, Jesus, how do I made the turn? Like, and now you enter off speed and everything's out of whack and you lost your line and you're slower. That's not the way to go faster. Instead of, let's say you have brake markers, 3, 2, 1, and then the turn. And let's say you get into the brakes at 3, you brake through 2, and you brake all the way till 1. And at 1, you let go and you start to turn in, you trail brake, you do all that stuff. So brakes on at 3, in it at 2, start to get off at 1. What you do, instead of moving 3 to 2.5, still brake at 3. You're comfortable with that. You know you're going to make the turn by 3. Brake to 2, but when you get to 1.5, let go. What this is going to do is scare the living shit out of you. You're going to feel the butterflies. You're going to be like, oh my God. And you got to trust it. You got to just let go of that brake and tip in and go. So because you're letting go of the brake, you're not going to lose the front. You lose the front when you push the brake marker closer, and you tip in and you're really on the brakes. That's when you lose the front. If you do this, if you let go a little bit earlier, you're not going to lose the front. You're going to go in maybe a mile an hour faster than you normally do. I watched my data on my laps on the video that I shared like a month ago. And if you look, the mile per hour that I'm at, lap after lap after lap, just pick any spot. The second apex of turn 2 at Thunder Hill, I'm either 73 miles an hour or 72 miles an hour. And there's 6 laps. Every single lap is either 73 or 72 miles an hour. I don't have a speedometer. That is the place where my threshold was. And our minds are amazing things. I am not an amazing human, but I have a brain just like you do, and our brains are amazing. Okay? They're amazing at reproducing things. You get to a threshold, it identifies, your brain identifies, I'm safe here, and you let go, and you go. You can reprogram that. And that's how you reprogram it. Let go a little bit earlier. Give yourself that, like this, and you'll make the turn. I promise you, you'll make the turn. And if you don't make the turn, you'll go straight. And this, you pick the place to do this experiment. At Thunder Hill, it's turn 13. It could be any turn at any track that you choose, like they do in MotoGP. They don't pick turns that are with the wall behind them to experiment. I'm going to find the edge of traction. They don't do that. They do it on the turns where there's a million miles of sand or gravel or whatever. Do it there. Use your mind. Now, one more point on this. I didn't forget this. Thank God. How if I went through this lesson and this process of turn 3 at Loudon, how in the world did that make me go 2 seconds a lap faster? Every weekend that year, I was like 22s, 22s, 21 9s, 22 2s. I just stuck the same. All of a sudden, 20, 2 seconds a lap faster. What the hell happened? That reprogramming that you do for turn 3 applies to every other turn on the track. You just learn. There's a new plateau. That's what this is about, right? You just reached a new plateau, a new mental picture, a new program. And every turn around the whole track will, this new lesson, this new understanding will be applied. If you don't believe me, here's another example. I was asked to race an Aprilia RS250 years and years ago in an endurance race. I don't ride two-strokes. I never rode the two-stroke in my life. I mean, I rode two-stroke dirt bikes, and I started racing an RZ350, but it had been like 10 years since I rode a two-stroke. I'm going off of Ducati 996, and I'm going to jump on an Aprilia? What the hell? So this one guy had the bike. He raced it every weekend, and he got a couple, I think there was 3 of us, and we all rode the bike. Maybe there was 4 of us. And I remember riding this bike like, what is this? It felt like a bicycle underneath me, first of all. And second of all, like, it would just go. You could approach turns, and I'm braking at my normal places on Ducatis, and all of a sudden I'm like, geez, I'm going way too slow for this turn. So I moved my markers. I moved my let off. I moved my get in the brakes. For some turns, I was like, I don't even need to use the brakes. It was amazing what I learned. Sometimes I remember tipping into a turn and going through an apex and saying, I cannot believe I am entering this turn at this speed. It is ridiculous. And it was fast. It turns out I went faster on that Aprilia than the owner of the bike, who raced it for a couple of 2 seasons, I think he raced it for. I set the fastest lap of the team, not because I'm special, but because, again, it pushed me to get to the new plateaus, the new understanding, learn something, and adjust and make your moves one incremental step at a time. But don't just sit there doing the same thing. Like, experiment and learn and teach yourself. So that's how you break through a plateau, and you learn and you get faster and you get better, and hopefully you don't crash your motorcycle. Okay, my next question is from a guy who I believe is from the UK, because he says he weighs 16 stones. I gotta say, we're definitely behind the 8 ball in America because we don't use the metric system, and we should. But stones? We're weighing ourselves at stones? So his question is, he says he has the stock spring on a 1290 Superduked, which is an 85 spring, and he weighs, the mass is about like 220 pounds or 225 pounds, something like that, which is more even than me, and I race with a 110. So he says, why, with such a soft spring for me, does it feel so hard? Like, it feels like I'm breaking my vertebrae. And he says, I'm not bottoming out. This is an excellent question, because it points to something that I've mentioned in the past, but really only like with math and with the term progressive. What's happening is this spring, we talked about springs and how they work, and a spring is linear. Unless it's a progressive spring, which are pretty rare, then the coils would be different sizes at different points of the spring. But if the spring just has the same size coil all the way down, it's a linear spring, meaning you put 100 pounds on it, it goes a certain amount. You put another 100 pounds, it goes the same amount again. Another 100 pounds, it goes the same amount again. No matter how far, like, the same amount of weight makes it compress the same amount as it goes through. But when you put it on a motorcycle that's got a linkage, like his Superduked does, links are designed in a very special way, at least on the Superduked they are, and most bikes they are, to create a difference. As that spring gets compressed, it's getting more and more force put into it, so effectively making the spring stiffer the farther the bike gets compressed. We're going to talk about links in another question in a minute, and you'll understand a little bit more about this. But the rate of the OEM spring, because of the linkage on a Superduked, a stock Superduked, because of that linkage and the special science and geometry of the math, as his suspension gets compressed, the spring gets stiffer. It gets progressively stiffer, stronger. So even though he's not bottoming out, he's riding his bike because he weighs what he weighs. What did I say? 16 stones? So he's riding the bike down here in the stroke of the shock. Up here, like if, let's say this is the swing arm, it's going to move like this, right? So with nobody on the bike, the swing arm is like this. With a really heavy guy on the bike, it's compressed like this. So nobody compress. He's riding the bike way down here. He's not bottoming out, but he's riding close to that. And he's riding in that progressive zone where that spring is, it's not an 85 spring anymore. At least it's not behaving that way in that range. That same 85 spring with a 110-pound hairstylist, she's riding up here. Soft as like an angel. It's nice, but down here, it's an animal. So that's why I sell the Superlink with a special control arm and a special triangle, not at all like this. It's a very different shaped triangle, which takes that progression out almost completely so that the spring gets compressed the same amount throughout the travel of the suspension. All bikes that have a linkage, usually there's a third-party company or 6 that make linkages where they take the progression out. You don't want such a progressive rate to the spring when you're like a sporty kind of a rider. When you're doing track days, get a performance link. When I raced Ducatis, they had a linkage for those that took the progression out, more linear. That's the way to go. Most race bikes, good setup track bikes, will have a more linear linkage. So that's the answer to that question. It's not your spring, it's your link. That's why you're feeling that progression. Boom. Okay, the next question is from a guy in Southern California who bought a link for his Superduked, but could be any motorcycle with a link. There's a lot of companies that make aftermarket links, and I can speak specifically about this one because I have all the data on a Superduked and a Superduked's linkage. Okay, so here is a sport link that I make for Superdukes, and it's got a very special design, a very expensive design actually, because you have to have data on this geometric shape, this triangle. You have to know the length of this, the length of this, the length of this. You need to know what each job of those lengths are, and you have to know when you change the length of this and you change this guy's job. One side of the triangle does height. One side of the triangle does rate. One side does progression. We talked about progression a minute ago. So those are all the primary jobs of each side of the triangle, but each of the sides also has a secondary effect. When you change one job, let's say you wanted to make a linkage that just made the height different, you're also going to change the other jobs secondarily. Even if you didn't change the length of this, you're going to change it because they all kind of work together to create your suspension, how it works and how it reacts. So when we designed the SportLink, mostly my friend Gavin, who's a rocket scientist, there was so much math involved, so much money involved, so much data involved. Very careful. 1 millimeter difference in one side of this triangle, and you completely change the link. In fact, this is related to another product that I sell. This is a super short. This is a control arm. And why am I talking about this? It's really interesting why. some people with legs that aren't so long, Superdukes, KTMs in general, are very tall bikes. The seat's really high. So what do you do if your legs aren't that long and you still like KTM? You still want to ride these bikes? You know, you come to a stop sign at the top of a hill, crest of a hill, and bike falls over. You can't reach the floor. It's unnerving. It must be hateful. So me and Gavin started working on a linkage that we could sell, because I sell a +10 linkage, a +15, a +20. They all make the bike a little higher and different geometry and a better drive and anti-squat, all these fancy things. But they all make the bike a little bit taller. What if you wanted to make it a little shorter? So Gavin tried all this math and trying to figure out how to make the bike shorter with just the link by changing all of these dimensions. And guess what? It's impossible. You cannot do it, because you wreck how the bike handles because of the secondary effects of each side of this triangle. So my customer in Southern California bought a link. I don't know where he bought it from, but check this out. It was a link that looked like this, except up here it was wider and there was 3 holes. You could put the bolt of the shock or this whatever it was bolted to this hole, or to this hole. No regard to this dimension, no regard to the secondary jobs, for primary jobs, not a care in the world. Just put it in a different hole, you'll be fine. Dude said his bike handled so badly that it was dangerous. He almost crashed going in a straight line on a highway. He said the bike was unmanageable. So, very interesting story, right? Very interesting lesson. Doesn't matter the bike, doesn't matter what it is, but linkages are wickedly complex. If you think you could just take a piece of cardboard in your garage and I'll just drill holes and put it there, yeah, you can, but I ain't riding the bike, and good luck riding it yourself, because it's going to be a disaster. I'm GoGo for Superduked.com. I hope you enjoyed this question and answer session, and much respect.